Hello and welcome to a LibraryPalooza Lookback. I'm Liam Meister from O'Connor High School, and today I have the immense pleasure of speaking with the great author Carl Deuker. Mr. Deuker has published several young adult sports fiction titles to massive popularity, including Runner, Payback Time, Jim Candy, and Swagger. And although clearly a sports lover and an athlete, Mr. Duker's novels also deal with very serious topics ranging from alcoholism and poverty to drug smuggling and even steroid use. And his most recent novel, which I hope we will get to speak about a little later on, Golden Arm, was actually nominated for a 2020 Tasha's book from the Texas Library Association. I hope I'm saying all of that right, because I am not very educated about that.
Well, I never knew how to say it either, so we'll both go with Tasha's. How's that?
Mr. Deuker, it is, as I aforementioned, mentioned, it is an immense pleasure to speak with you. I've read several of your books, and they're fantastic.
Well, that's very nice. And please call me Carl if you can manage.
Okay.
If it's
All
if
right,
it's
I'll
uncomfortable
try
for
my
you.
best.
Okay, yeah, if it's uncomfortable, stay with Mr. Deuker, but I'm fine with Carl.
All right. You were featured at LibraryPalooza in 2015. What do you remember from that? And was it any different than what you might anticipate it being this year?
You know what? It was great meeting other authors, and the hospitality was tremendous. Lucy Podmore, I think I'm saying her name probably wrong, but anyway, she was great and just made everybody feel incredibly welcome. But the thing I remember most is just the energy of being around students, and particularly, I have taught school, so there are readers and then there are other kids in the school. And so when you get a place or in a position where all the readers are together and they can kind of look around and say, oh, you know what, you get as excited about books as I do. And it's just us, the people who do really get excited about books, that are here together. And I don't have to kind of hide it or feel embarrassed about it or anything. I can just let my enthusiasm for reading and books out in the open. And so that's what I really remember most, is just that kind of energy and the feeling of, we all love books, and that's why we're all here.
And it is such a great community of book lovers. Speaking of benefits, what are some of the benefits of festivals like LibraryPalooza?
Oh, the meeting other people is one of the first things. And when you're a writer, a lot of what you do is really alone. And so, you sort of wonder, well, is this actually ever getting there? And you hear, and I get letters from people and all, but it's just to actually go and meet readers and see people and see that they're enthused about what you did, and to hear people say, this really had an impact on me. Because I'm not a fast writer. It takes me a long time. There are certain people who can just whip things through, but it's work for me. So to see that the work I put in is appreciated, and to sort of feel like you kind of touch people, and it's very encouraging, and it gives me incentive to keep sticking with it and working on. So it's just a really nice sort of back and forth that you don't usually get as an author, since you're sitting at the computer and you get a review in the mail, but it's not like seeing people in person.
That must be an incredible feeling to see your work actually have an impact and manifest in someone else's life.
Yeah, it really actually is. Like I don't. Well, you've read some of my books. I don't know why this is, but I get a lot of letters that start, I don't generally read, or I don't really like books, but your book got to me, and that's a nice thing to read too, because I feel like, as you said in the beginning, it's not just a sports book. There's something else there, and so for me, it's like, so I always write back and say, okay, see, it's not that you don't like reading, it's just you haven't found the right books yet. And so, talk to your librarian, look for other books that you might like that are like this, because it's not a dislike of reading. It's just sometimes you got to find the right book.
I have to compliment your writing here. Your descriptions of action scenes paint such a vivid imagery in people's heads, and excuse the outdated reference, but like a Beatles lyric or a Jimi Hendrix lyric, where it's just like a still shot of such a lucid picture in your mind. And
Well, thank you. That's a great compliment. You know, there's one thing, well, maybe two things about that. One is I listened to the radio growing up, not TV, didn't watch anything on TV. And so the radio guys, you know, they don't just say ground ball. You know, they got to say ground ball to the right of the second baseman. He's up with it. He fields it. It's over to first on one hop. He digs it out of the dirt. See, because they have to paint the entire picture. And I think since I listened to the radio so much, the San Francisco Giants, and lived and died with that, I think that helped me a lot rather than watching on TV. And the other thing is there's an old broadcaster, you probably have heard his name, Howard Cosell, who was really, really great. He was the first commentator on Monday Night Football. And one of the things they said they asked Howard Cosell, well, how come you're better than everybody else? And he said, well, what I understand is the game is unimportant, that it's something else has to be going on. There has to be a story behind the game. And if you're just describing the game, it's just, all the games are the same. So there's some other story, some other element that always has to be there. So whenever I try to write a game, I think, okay, what's that other element that needs to be in this game? And if there is no other element and it's just a game, then just give the score and go on.
And I think that is the paragon of what you do. You put tremendous stories behind these games.
Thank you.
What can your readers be looking forward to coming out?
Well, I'm working on a book
soon?
called Shadowed, and it's a sort of a ghost story in a way, friendship, and then I don't want to give too much away, but you know, there's a split up, and the one boy who goes away is sort of a shadow he remains in the other person's life, and has an influence on what he does, and he actually sort of wonders if he's feeling his presence at various points. Anyway, it's an influence of one person who moves out of the person's life in a sort of tragic way on the person as he goes forward. So I'm calling it Shadowed. I don't know.
That sounds great. You recently released Golden Arm, your newest book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Golden Arm, there's a little funny, it's not funny, there's a story that goes with it. I live in Seattle. We have a big homeless problem in Seattle, as most of the West Coast cities do. The weather's pretty good. People come out here. It's very expensive, big drug addiction problem. So one of the places near me is a mobile home court, and it's on Aurora Avenue up in not a very rich section, but it's pretty close to town and it's right on transportation. And as I was driving by a couple times, I thought, you know, I bet developers would love to get a hold of this land. It's a big chunk of land. So I started thinking about what it would be like for a person to be living there, not rich, going to be a poor person because it's a mobile home court, and then to have these developers come in and move them out, basically. So I developed a story where that's what happens, and the boy is going to be a senior in high school, and once he's got a golden arm, he's a great pitcher, no good coaching, crummy team, and now all of a sudden he's got to go to a whole new school in another district, and he was dreaming of getting drafted in the major leagues, but how's anybody even going to know he exists if he's trying to start all over again as a senior because he loses his home? So that's the basic plot of him trying to find a way to make himself known. It's tough.
Impacted your writing / reading / visiting habits?
Well, I'm sure just like you, I mean, I've gotten into an incredible routine where I make sure I do certain things every day, I exercise every day, I do a little golf every day, I do a little writing every day, but it does feel like sort of Groundhog Day. It's like, I will certainly appreciate, we've got a beautiful museum about 2 blocks from us, and I think really like to go into the museum and look at it's a Nordic art museum, get a cup of coffee and look at the paintings and just sort of walk around, and none of that. And with the writing, with the book I'm working on, since I really didn't know how to handle it, so what I decided to do was to have the book end at the beginning of the pandemic, because I really don't, I feel like not much happens, there's no team practices, there's so little interaction that people are having, and novels are based on interaction, at least. So for me, I just said, okay, I will stop the book at the start of the pandemic, and that'll be where it ends. So that's how I got around that. Now we'll see how it goes.
Wow. How have different events that obviously we can now no longer attend, at least in person, like LibraryPalooza, how have they impacted your writing, if at all?
Oh, just as I said it before, they give you more incentive to write. So it's a boost. Even all the letters I get in the mail are the same way. If somebody writes, and people think, oh, as adults, you're not like kids, but we're just like kids. If you get a pat on the back, you feel better about something, and you're more likely to do it. If somebody tells you you're terrible at something, you think, well, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. So it doesn't really change. You just get older, and the pats on the back are a little different, but they still work the same way. A pat on the back is encouraging, and it helps you keep going. Yeah.
I did want to talk just briefly about the themes / settings of your book. This isn't on the list, but all of your books are very realistic, and they all deal with very realistic problems: drugs, alcohol, poverty. Is there any specific reason rather, that you chose to go with a more realistic setting than curving towards the more surreal, removed from rationality?
I think because I'm a teacher, or have been a teacher for so many years, a classroom is like a big family. I've had lots of kids that have had lots of troubles. I've had lots of kids that have been, just kind of cruised through. But when you have this sort of big family, it's a cliche, but teachers really care about their kids. And so those students impacted me. So books like Night Hoops, for example, that was really based on stuff that happened in my classroom. And the way it ended up in real life was terrible. And Night Hoops isn't exactly cheerful, but I kind of rewrote it to kind of work out the demons, so to say. So, for me, the interaction of people, the whole sort of Vanity Fair, how we interact is the most important thing. Sometimes people will say to me, what's your newest book about? What sport? And I'll have to think, okay, now what sport is it? Because the sport part of it is, I feel like I owe that to my readers. They want sports, and I work hard to make the games realistic, which is why it was so nice to hear that you thought they were. But the heart of the story is not the sports. It's the human drama.
It's, um, I did want to ask something along the lines of what you just said. Are all of your books based on events that have happened in your life, or just some of them?
I would say probably 80 to 90% are either things that have happened to me, happened to my friends. That Jim Candy is pretty much straight from the newspaper. That's the steroid book. That came to me from, I read a newspaper article about a high school boy, a senior baseball pitcher, who deeply involved in steroids and actually killed himself. And that was what got me going with Jim Candy. So that may be the only one that's strictly from reading the newspaper and being totally startled by what I read, because I, really had never thought that steroids were in play at all in high schools.
Well, thank you for
Okay.
talking with me today. Since you joined us in 2015, which is a little while ago, your books have been checked out from our libraries over 6,000 times.
Well, that's quite a thing to hear. That's really nice. Yeah.
And of course, we all look back to whenever the day is that you can come back and do actual events.
Well, Liam, it was great talking to you. And I guess, should we sign off now?